Welcome back to BYoungMinistry.com, to another blog and to another podcast. I'd like to welcome those who access the podcast through Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify. Today we begin a new study in the book of Genesis. We're in chapter 1, verse 1, which reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." That's Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. An understanding of the Bible and God's redemptive plan of mankind begins with a study of the book of Genesis, which is quoted more than 200 times in the New Testament. Genesis is foundational. It tells us the origin of everything, the origin of the universe, the origin of man, the origin of sin and the fall of man, the origin of marriage, the origin of human government, the origin of the nation of Israel, through whom the Messiah came. It tells us all of those original, beginning things. Now, Genesis covers about 2,500 years of human history. There's controversy as to when the beginning was, how long ago that was, but the book of Genesis covers at least 2,500 years of human history. From the fall of man and the early chapters of the death of Joseph, Genesis has three main divisions. The first is found in Genesis chapters 1 and 2, which is about creation. The second section, found in Genesis 3 through 11, is about degeneration. And then the last section, Genesis 12 through 50, is about regeneration. Or to put it another way, it can be divided into 4 events and 4 people: creation, the fall, the flood, the Tower of Babel, and then the 4 people: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Today's verse begins with "in the beginning." We can't go back any farther than that. And when we tally up the time, we speculate that the earth is around 10,000 years old. Some say it's as young as 6,000 years old. And then there are those who teach the gap theory, which presents the earth as millions of years old. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day how old the earth is. The main thing is that God created it, and with its creation, He included time, force, action, space, and matter. In the beginning, that's the time. God, that's the force. Created, that's the action. The heavens, that's the space. And the earth, that's the matter. So, the Bible begins with the words, "In the beginning, God." The Bible assumes God's existence. Many try to eliminate God out of the equation, but where we go back into the farthest reach of the past, we still would not have answered the question, how did it all begin? Until we acknowledge there must be some first uncaused cause, we will not have drawn any plausible conclusion. Many have sought to eliminate God from the beginning because, as Romans chapter 1 tells us, they did not wish to retain God in their minds. As soon as we acknowledge there's a God who is our creator, we then are accountable to Him. The so-called theory of evolution was invented in order to try to eliminate the God of the Bible out of the equation. The goal of the evolutionists was to try to do away with universal morality and universal guilt and universal accountability. Evolution was invented to eliminate the judge and leave people free to do whatever they want without guilt and without consequences. But it makes no sense to believe in time plus chance plus nothing. The idea that the universe was created by chance, without no ultimate creator and design and purpose, is not logical. God didn't tell us a lot about his creative process. In fact, there are only 630 words used by God to describe the origin of everything. He will spend far more time in space talking about people like Abraham than he did creation. This merely reminds us that the purpose of creation isn't a biological lesson. God, the author of all things, has an agenda to show us briefly the origin of all things and then to take us quickly to reveal to us himself and his redemptive history. The modern mind today believes that evolution is such a done deal and such a closed case it can't even be argued. That is telling. Some of the most brilliant minds in the scientific community would say, "Not so fast, my friend." They say it is not a closed case because evolution is even more speculative today than it was when Charles Darwin presented it to the world. In fact, molecular biologist Michael Denton once said, and I quote, "The evolutionary theory is still, as it was in Darwin's time, a high speculative hypothesis, entirely without direct factual support." One of the glaring problems Darwin saw with his evolutionary theory was the fossil record. He knew that there were huge gaps in it, inexplicable gaps in the fossil record that paleontology did not agree with even then. But he also believed and stated at that time that time would vindicate him. That the more we study the fossil record, the more we will know that evolution is a fact. Well, in over 120 years since Darwin's time, the curator of the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago writes these words: "We are now over 120 years after Darwin, and the knowledge of the fossil record has been greatly expanded. We now have 250,000 fossil species, but the situation hasn't changed much. We have fewer examples of evolutionary transition than we had in Darwin's time." Anyone who believes in evolution, in fact, has to have way more faith than the creationist, because evolution teaches that over billions of years, just random time and space, created by nothing, is responsible for this highly complex carbon life in our biosphere. The evolutionist rejects the idea that God has placed eternity in our hearts. They reject Augustine's words, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." The evolutionist rejects the words of C.S. Lewis, who said, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world." And it takes far more faith to believe in that than to believe in the beginning, God created. My friends, I trust this blog and this podcast are helping you with your walk with the Lord. If I can be of further assistance to you, shoot me an email at BYoungMinistry@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.